Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is What Used to Be My Sister by My Eyes Don't Breathe. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like, and if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. The ghost of that night still lingers in my mind. It only comes back in fragments, like an unfinished puzzle taunting me with the knowledge that I shall never see it whole again. I spent many nights staring into the nothingness, my hindsight scolding me for not knowing what to do. That's the thing about hindsight. It's obvious what you should have done once the paths are revealed. But while you're trapped in the fog of the moment, every path is concealed, and the most dire directions are dictated by luck. If only I was one of the lucky ones. I remember waking up, my phone desperately buzzing for my attention, my hand drunkenly finding its way to my phone and slamming it sloppily into my ear, still in the process of waking up. I remember being greeted by my mother's voice, and I remember how the tinge of fear pulled me into consciousness. I only remember the noise she made, not the words she spoke. What I do remember is the tsunami of adrenaline surging through my body as I sped over to the woods. I remember standing at the jaws of the forest, a stampede of green swallowing the horizon. I remember her pulsing screams and the purest fear which inhabited them, each one threatening to tear my heart out of my chest as I drew closer. I remember seeing her body splayed helplessly on the floor as she clung desperately to life. Her clothes and flesh were torn and mangled together in an amalgam of blood and fabric. Her hair was matted with blood and twisted with dirt and foliage. Her face was almost unrecognizable. Chunks of skin flapped uselessly on her face, revealing pools of crimson beneath them. There was no way to distinguish what were the teeth or the eyes or the nose. It was all red. I remember lurching violently to the side as a snake of vomit slithered from my throat. Everything else was a blur. As much as we wanted to take her to the hospital, an empty wallet can only do so much. I knew how distraught my mother was. Not only did she blame herself for not being there to prevent it, we all did to some extent, but she couldn't even come and check up on her, as the commotion of the pandemic held her hostage in Greece. Although a mother's stress could not be quelled, I tried my best. I assured her that I would check up on Cassie every day. This promise calmed her enough to stop attacking the airport staff. So from that point, I checked up on my sister every day. I made sure every spot of the house was clean enough to perform surgery on, cooked the most lavish of meals, despite Cassie's diminished appetite, and wrapped her in more blankets than I had birthdays. My weekly shops became weekly heists. I could barely afford enough to feed myself, so legally acquiring that much food was close to impossible. As cruel as it sounds, I'm glad Cassie was barely conscious for half of the day. I could never be strong enough to stop myself from breaking down in the bathroom. Not like Cassie. One morning, I was in the process of juggling cooking bacon, eggs, beans, toast, hash browns, and mushrooms. I heard an inhuman sputtering ricochet through the hallway. This was strange in every aspect of the situation. Not only had she not spoken since the incident, but that was not her voice. The voice that had made that noise was indescribable. It had no accent, no pitch, no tone. It was absolute default. I decided quickly that my sister's possible encounter with an intruder was more important than a couple of burnt eggs, and hurriedly hurtled down the hallway. When I got to her door, which stood solemn and proud at the very extremity of the hall, my full weight deflected off the door. I had expected it to buckle, but instead it held strong and defiant. After recovering from the unexpected failure, I tried again, with more force and purpose. Once again, I was merely discarded by the door. Repeatedly, I hurled my body at the door, a cocktail of anger, confusion, and worry, bubbling fierce within my gut with every failed collision. As I felt myself on the verge of erupting, a slip of paper glided silently through my legs. Caught off guard, I snatched it from the tacky floorboards and unscrunched it. "I'm fine. Please leave me alone." Suddenly the anger became guilt, and I immediately apologized to my unseen sister. In the process of forming the next sentence, the aroma of charred bacon filled my mind, and I quickly deserted my position outside her door to tend to what used to be Cassie's breakfast. Maybe I didn't notice it at first due to how subtle its appearance was, but eventually it became too strong to ignore. The pungent miasma of rotten meat invades my senses. Every day I scoured for the perpetrator, but it never resulted in a discovery. I tried to ignore its existence and get on with the daily routine, but it was always there, worming into the back of my mind, nose and mouth. Soon it became impossible to coexist with. That's when I made a mistake. I bolted towards Cassie's room, the front of my shirt clenched tightly around my nose. 3 consecutive bangs on her door, no response. Once again, I pounded rhythmically on the door which once mocked me. A chorus of shouting soon joined the knocks as they became less uniform. Still no response. I knew trying to tackle the door open wouldn't work, so I leapt back to the kitchen, snatched a screwdriver from the drawer, and returned to the door, prepared to finally best it. Once the hinges were no longer snug tightly in their indents, all it took was one triumphant shove to knock my tormentor out of its frame. I remember it so well. A blade of light snuck through the blackened curtains. The once grayed carpet glistened a deep scarlet. The walls were scrawled head to toe in unfamiliar glyphs and symbols. Half-decayed chunks of flesh sat scattered around the floor. In the epicenter of this carnage sat what I used to believe was my sister, concealed in a heavy blanket and undisturbed by my entrance. Unbridled fear coursed painfully through my veins, holding me hostage to this macabre display. Gradually, the figure twisted as it rose, unsheathing its twisted impression of arms. The simulacrum of my sister towered above me, hollow sockets piercing my gaze. This was not my sister. It never was. I ran. I don't know when I stopped or where I was going, but I just ran. Windows shot past me, each one holding the blur of someone else's life. Once I found myself at my doorstep, I tackled the door and slammed it behind me, checking vigorously that it was locked. I haven't returned to her house since, and I have no plan to.